Hey everybody, welcome to the Book Leads Impactful Books for Life and Leadership. I'm your series host and leadership performance coach, John Jaramillo. This podcast series is about getting to the books that have impacted the lives of the people in my network. So these are great leads that I'll be interviewing to get to those books that have impacted them, inspired them, changed their lives, whether they're the author of the book we're discussing or not. The three categories of books that I cover on the series are a book in category one where they're sharing with me a book that I haven't read. Category two is when we're discussing a book that we've both read, whether specifically for that episode or before the series even launched. And then the third category is when I get to have the author and or publisher on the series to talk about the book, to give it a face, to give it a name, some substance, some backstory, just to kind of get to that message that they want to put out to the masses. And my guest today is Damon Lembi. And Damon is a two-time best-selling author, the host of the Learn It All podcast, and the CEO of Learnit, a live learning platform that has upskilled over 2 million people. Drawing from his prior baseball career, Damon brings an athlete's perspective to leadership. Through his journey, he has gained invaluable insights into what helps organizations grow, how great leaders learn, and why Learn It All companies outpace their competitors every time. And I invited Damon on. We were just discussing this before, where we popped on here, saw each other, and it wasn't on LinkedIn because I am scrolling through my feed and I always see Damon's conversations and snippets of his own podcast. So it's just interesting for months or as long as we've been connected, Damon, to see somebody putting out that content just in such a thorough way, an intentional way. And having done this and having spoken to so many people, coached so many people, you kind of get that idea for when somebody's really invested in what they're doing and when they're just doing it for content creation. So I have a deep appreciation for the work that Damon has done. Reached out to him. He was game, and here we are. So thank you so much for coming on, Damon.
John, I appreciate all you do, and it's an honor to be here. Thanks for having me.
My first question, went through the bio. Who are you today? So before we dive into the book, I always like to get some insight into my guests. So what does your work look like today so people get an idea of what you're doing with your clients day to day, like what kind of programs you're offering, just to kind of get some insight into who you are and how you're navigating your work with your clients?
Well, great. So yeah, I'm Damon Lembi, and my company is Learnit, and we're a live learning platform. And essentially what that means is we work with organizations. It's all B2B, but across the board. And customers turn to us when they may be promoting somebody from an individual contributor to a new manager. And so it's a totally different skill set. So we help ramp them up with those skills. Or if organizations are struggling from a culture perspective and employees are putting out on performance reviews that, hey, I don't have enough professional growth opportunities. So we help design programs that help meet those needs. And also there are times where companies are struggling with communication or working in silos, and so we build programs that help bring them back together. So in a nutshell, that's really what we do. Most of it is virtual training over Zoom. About 15-20% is live in person. And it's been kind of crazy. We literally just a couple weeks ago celebrated our 30-year anniversary.
Wow.
And never in my wildest dreams, and I'm sure we'll talk about that today, did I imagine that I would dedicate my career in the learning and development field, but I love where I'm at.
30 years, that's amazing.
Yeah.
That's incredible. Congratulations.
Thank you. It's either really smart or really stupid, but I love it.
Hey, either can last for a very long time.
That's true.
As long as you're happy, right?
Yeah, I love going to work every day, so I'm blessed for that.
So when it comes to who you are today, what is your story in terms of how did it start? And usually I ask people to start maybe around high school, the time that they're going into the workforce. What did that path look like from then to now? And how did you kind of get to the point where you are?
Yeah, so I'll start in high school because I think that's important. I was a big sports guy, baseball, football, basketball. I was really fortunate to grow up with a bunch of buddies who were the same way. I'm out here in San Francisco Bay Area, so it was 49ers, Giants, Warriors. By the time I was a sophomore in high school, I realized that if I was going to play sports in college or professionally, baseball was my ticket. So I went all in on baseball, and things turned out pretty well. I was a high school All-American. I was drafted by the Atlanta Braves back in 1990, kind of dating myself. And it was my first big choice. My parents were super cool. They said, you have a full ride to Pepperdine University to play baseball, or you can go to the minor leagues. We'll support you any direction you want to go. I went the route of Pepperdine. I think one of it was because I was a young 17-year-old and I was a little nervous to go into the minor leagues. But two, I really bought into the dream that our coach, Hall of Fame coach Andy Lopez, had at Pepperdine. It was a moonshot goal. He said, we're going to win the College World Series within the next 2 years. And Pepperdine's the small 2,500 person school. So a lot of people thought, that might be tough going against LSU or Oklahoma or something like that. And so that's really where I started. My journey began, and I went to Pepperdine. And I got there. If you have any questions, please let me know. I had some imposter syndrome, got hurt. I ended up leaving Pepperdine. And by the way, they won the College World Series the year I left, which is happy for them. Bummed out I missed that. And I ended up at Arizona State. I got a scholarship to go to Arizona State, and a lot of people, John, said, hey, don't go there. They're going to have 17 guys trying out for first base. Why don't you go to a smaller school, someplace where you can play, get your degree, and move on? But for me, my whole life was about baseball. So I finally, leveled up, and so I'm going to go all in, get rid of the imposter syndrome, and I gave it everything I got. I was one of those guys. I was the first one on the field, the last one to leave. I had a great career at Arizona State that I was so proud of. Hit a home run. My wife likes to call it my glory days in the College World Series. Was getting ready to be drafted for the third time, and sometimes things just don't turn out the way you expect them to. My call never came. Here I am, 22 years old. I only identified as a baseball player. That's all I ever really wanted to be. That's what my friends knew me as. And so here I was. I didn't know what I was going to do. I didn't know if my skills were transferable. That's where my baseball career ended and where my business career started.
So what happens after that?
Okay. So what happens after that?
Yeah,
I was
keep
lucky.
going. I want to know.
Okay. I'll keep going.
Yeah, absolutely. Please.
Yeah. So, I was really lucky. I come from this family and one of the largest real estate companies in San Francisco. And my dad, Walt Lembi, who is like my idol, he always had different ventures, everything from shopping centers to hotels. But I was kind of, again, a little intimidated and didn't know if my skills were transferable. And right when I was done with baseball, he was starting this company called Learnit at the time, which is a computer training company. And like a lot of great entrepreneurs, he went and took a class at someplace, and he really wanted to digitize our portfolio, our real estate portfolio. Remember, this was like 1993, where computers were, weren't as prevalent. And so he went to this class and he said, this is boring, it's sterile, there's got to be a better way to do it. So like a lot of great entrepreneurs, he found a need and wanted to figure out a better way to do it. And that was through short 90-minute classes. And so he called up the guy who used to be the CFO of our savings and loan. He said, computers are hot. Steve Jobs is hot. Let's figure out a way to make classes fun, entertaining. People could come to our office building in San Francisco. They can make friends. They can get dates. Who knows? And that's where the idea of Learnit came about. My baseball career was over with. I knew the guy, John Ashton, and so I was friends with him. So I started there as a receptionist. And I started as a receptionist for two reasons. One, I didn't want to have the silver spoon where Walt Lembi's kid is, starting off as a senior executive, just put him into this high role. I wanted to prove myself. And two, quite frankly, I didn't know what I was capable of doing. And so I just kind of bit the bullet, started off as a receptionist, answered more phone calls than anybody, probably in the history of Learnit. And one of the things that I realized starting as a receptionist, that the people around me, they didn't have the same competitive edge or drive that I was used to seeing in the sports world. People would show up late to work. If we lose a deal, wasn't that big of a deal. And I again went all in. I said, my family did so much for me. They invested in me all these years. I want to give back. I want to make sure that Learnit does well. And so I went all in at Learnit. I taught classes. I did sales. And fast forward about, 4 or 5 years, the CEO wasn't working out. My dad and him parted ways amicably. The board was looking for a new CEO. I said, hey, why don't you give me a shot? I've answered 1,000 phone calls. I've closed some of our biggest deals like the Gap and Chevron and all these things, and I've taught classes. And so they said, all right. They gave me an opportunity, and here I am 25 years later, still the CEO of Learnit. I love it. Learnit's morphed from a computer training company to a holistic learning and development company where we really focus more, like I mentioned, on individual contributors through senior managers, mostly on soft skills, which I don't like that term, but I like to call them human skills, like leadership and listening and emotional intelligence and creativity, problem solving, decision making, and I loved it. It's been a great and fun journey.
So Damon, when it comes to you, that journey of baseball, I'm curious, what does that conversation look like with yourself when you realize that it is the end of that particular road at that instant? What does that conversation look like? Because it is, to get to that level, like you said, you got to get there early, you got to leave late. It's like, eat, sleep, drink baseball, right? It's in your blood. So what does that look like when you have to shift away from that?
Yeah, a lot of people said, well, what was your major at Arizona State? And I said, well, baseball, really. I don't think my mom...
What did you study, though, out of curiosity?
Business communications.
Okay.
Staying eligible to get through. I was never a good student, which is so funny because that's I've learning has impacted my entire life since, and if I had to go back, I would be better at it. But hopefully this is something that my young kids and like you and I discussed can learn. College is a whole nother story of what that's going to be like, obviously for them. But that conversation in my head was, baseball's over with. It is a little tough. I remember one of my very best friends is Jacob Cruz. He's from Los Angeles. He hit behind me in the lineup at Arizona State. And going out and seeing him hit a home run against the Dodgers at Candlestick Park, like 6 months after my career at Arizona State ended. And on one hand, that was really hard, right? Because that's what I wanted to do, what I wanted to be, which I wanted to make my dad proud of me doing. And on the other hand, I'm super happy for Cruiser, and I really am. One day he called me, and he fouled off a fastball, and he said, I stepped out of the box, I think it was against Pittsburgh, and he said, I remember you would have crushed that pitch. So that conversation was very difficult, but I also thought there's got to be something that I'm great at. I really think, here I am, I'm only 22, 23 years old. What can I do to both give back to my family, but also be proud of myself? And so I figured there had to be something I'm great at, and I'm just one of those guys, I guess, who go all in, and that's what I did at Learnit. So I really studied hard and read a lot of books, especially when I got into a leadership role, and that's where learning has had such a huge impact, because I didn't have a degree from Harvard Business School or some Ivy League school, and there's nothing wrong with that at all. Those are fantastic, especially for the network, but it just shows you guys like me, women who have played sports, that athletic education is so invaluable, and you can become a great leader or a great coach or a great parent if you invest the time and energy into doing so. Yeah, that reminds me of a story when I was volunteering at my university after I graduated, where I got my MBA, the University of Hartford. Go back, I helped the students that are leaving, they're graduating soon, so they want to do all like the mock interviews and the mocktail hour and kind of get them prepared to kind of talk about themselves. And, they gave me a small group of people, and I was just kind of shooting the breeze with them, trying to learn about them. And one of them had commented that he didn't have much to contribute to any place that he would go work. And I'm like, all right, well, tell me about your career here at the school. He's like, well, I'm on the baseball team, been on it all 4 years, practice a couple times a day. I was called up as the captain of the team. So even at that point, he didn't realize like all the value from his discipline, his commitment, his hard work. Like I had to point it out to him and say, this is just as valuable. You don't have the specific tangibles of the work that you'll be doing, but it's about the mentality, and the mentality sometimes is more important than the work that you're going in to do. You can bring somebody in that has the tools, the knowledge of what to do, how to do it, when to do it. But then some people come in and they don't have the mentality to work the way that you have. So there is value in that. So I love seeing stories like yours when you can apply the mindset of the athlete to the workplace, to leadership, because I believe
the most important attributes are those that transfer over. It's incredible.
Well, one thing I hear you saying, which I think is incredibly important for all your listeners, is either as a mentor or as a coach for this young man, you drew out of him the greatness inside of him, which so many people, John, don't understand that they have inside of them. And I think that that's one of the most important things that a leader or a coach or a parent can do, is help people see the greatness inside of them, because it's true. And I've been fortunate myself as well, from my high school baseball coach to others who, I think a lot of times too, high performers who expect perfection, they're really hard on themselves. And so having somebody like yourself that can do that and to help elevate the person is amazing. And yes, I think athletes, I have a buddy named Jamie Tudorici who told me a great story. I'll say it very quickly. He was a number 300th in the world playing tennis, never made a lot of money doing it. He knew somebody who gave him an opportunity to interview at a place called Montgomery Securities. The guy said, "Why should I hire you? I got 19 guys lined up with more experience, with MBAs." And Jamie just said, "Look, if you give me an opportunity, I will outwork everybody, and I will learn, and I will grow, and I'm good at taking feedback." And when him and I had that conversation early on in our friendship, I'm like, "You must have heard me say that somewhere, because that's like exactly what I would say." You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And he's like, "No, man, that's the truth." And so that poor guy, especially around kids and athletes, whenever we're together, I always make him repeat that story, because I think it's so true that athlete mentality is really, really important. And you don't need to go all the way through college or play in the pros to do that. Even if you play high school sports, I think you will gain a lot of that. And that's why, for all you parents out there, please get your kids involved in sports. Even individual sports and team sports, there are so many great learning lessons.
Yeah, it's incredible to see my boys trying different things. The older one, the only thing that he's really taken to is golf. And, he's tried everything else, didn't really like it. And then to go into golf, every sport has its own type of discipline. But the mind game that is golf is just incredible. And then my other one will pick up any ball you give him. We'll go to the high school, like on the weekend, just to kind of do whatever. He's like, "I want you to bring my football, my soccer, my tennis rackets, my baseball, my this, my that." But it's incredible how all it takes is for someone of any age, of any background, of any season in life, of any profession, to someone else of any age, of any season, of whatever, the same thing. All it takes is for someone to ask questions, to look the person in the eye, to tell them what they see, to remind them of what's there. All it takes is one quick conversation. You don't even have to sit down. It could be something in passing, but something you tell someone, something you ask somebody just kind of switches their mind on in a different direction. So I bring up my son's team because I coached my 6-year-old son's soccer team this past spring. And it was great. I got a card from one of the players saying, "Thanks, coach. Thanks for all your support." It's just incredible. I mean, kids are more impressionable. So the reaction you're going to get from them when you tell them, "Good job. What did you learn today? What do you want to switch up?" Those kinds of things, they're more surprised by those kinds of questions. But the lesson is the same. Like, tell somebody what you see, ask somebody about what you see. So any opportunity that I don't have all the answers, but I have the curiosity about people. I think that can just kind of, again, just that little switch to get people thinking a different way.
Yeah, there's this woman who, her name is Laurel Taylor. She started with me right out of school. She was a great sales rep. And about 10 years ago, we caught up, went to lunch in the city, and she went, I think she just got done with MIT Business School or something, and then she was going to go back and work for Google or whatever. And I just said, "Laurel, why haven't you started your own thing?" And she's like, "You really think I could do it?" I'm like, "Absolutely, you could do it." And here she is. She is the CEO and founder of this company called Candidly. She's raised about $60 million, and it's all about crushing student debt. And I'm not want to take any credit from what Laurel did at all. But a lot of times she would tell you that one question, like you just said, unlocked this thought in her mind and really helped her decide to go for it.
Yeah. For me, that's the best part of coaching is that aha moment when you see somebody's eyes kind of like, yeah, no one's ever asked me. Even on here, great professionals, great business people like yourselves. Some of them, I've asked them a question and some of them have said, no one's ever asked me that. I never looked at it that way. Now you got me thinking, just because I'm just curious about them as a person. I'm listening to what they're telling me, and I'm seeing maybe certain patterns or not, and kind of asking about certain details. So again, even somebody who comes out of MIT, you just have to point them in a direction or ask them a certain question, and they're off to the races.
Let me ask you this, though. What is the most frustrating part? You mentioned the best part. What do you think the most frustrating part about coaching is?
I think it's when you see people self-sabotaging because of their behaviors, the way that they're programmed, and it takes consistent work to kind of reprogram who they are. Obviously, there have been leaders where you kind of meet, they're not ready for coaching. It's like, okay, absolutely fine, because you want to be sure that the person that you're working with is open to it, and some just completely aren't. They were kind of put into it by their bosses. But yeah, the reprogramming that it takes, because we go through life, we go through our career in survival mode, a certain programming. So when we realize that's not working, it's hard. It's like, okay, maybe I'm ready to change, but how? If this is the way that I've always lived, this is the way I've always thought, this is the way I've always worked. So it's kind of like retraining our brains for new habits instead of the same old script that we've always had. So that's the most difficult part. But I mean, it's constant work and accountability.
No, I agree. I agree that the most frustrating ones are the people who have a know-it-all mentality or a victim mindset, I find.
Yeah.
And they self-sabotage themselves, and they don't realize that there's a lot out there. If they were more curious, that they can get out of the world.
Yeah, I don't know if it's a fear mentality. I think so much of what's going on in the world today is based in fear. You know, if I let my guard down, if I open up, if I'm transparent, if I'm overly vulnerable, if I demonstrate or admit that I need to change my ways, that shows weakness of some kind. So I think so much of the bullshit that we deal with and see in the world today is driven by fear, which is a shame. But I mean, you just have to look for communities where there is accountability, but it's a safe, experimenting accountability. You know, you have room, there's patience for whoever joins that community to grow and learn. Just that constant experimentation that you don't have to fire on all cylinders all the time, and it doesn't have to be perfect. I think we're just a society that puts pressure on ourselves a lot. It's a shame, but I think people are coming around to the fact that you don't always have to have that perfect facade, that you can kind of open up, and as long as you're honest and genuine, people will work with you and people will try to understand you. But I don't know if it's the case for you, but the longer you're in this business, the more you work with people, the more there is left to understand. Well, like what I just told you about this podcast is the more that I do it, the more I realize that there is more to learn and see.
Yeah, there's always more to learn and see. And also what I've found, just for being in this world 52 years, nothing really surprises me anymore. Right? You know, you never know everything. There's somebody out there sharper, smarter, better, and I think if you feel like you've peaked, I mean, you're gonna really struggle as well. And I think a lot of it, I agree with you, a lot of it has to do with fear. And I think some of it has to do with laziness. Some people just don't want to change. And I think that's one of the tough things about learning, is that learning requires making a behavior change, and so many people are set in their ways. So they're like, oh, this would be too much of an effort. Things are fine the way they are, and then they give pushback on it. Yeah.
I mean, everything that is worth it, I mean, there's going to be an obstacle. There's going to be work. It's a shame. But even those people, I've seen people like that where if you posed a certain question to them as well. So as long as we don't give up on anybody and we ask them the same questions just to I just want you to consider this particular idea. What do you think? Because it's incredible how people may be lazy because they don't think they can make a change in their world. They don't think they can effectuate any kind of adjustment, that the cards that they've been dealt are all they have. And sometimes it just takes that question, comment, suggestion to open up their mind to, okay, I can do it. It doesn't have to be a huge effort. I can do it a little bit at a time, incrementally. So that's the other thing. It's tricky, is just everybody is just so different, completely different. There's nothing cookie cutter,
No, there's nothing cookie cutter. And people should be different. And I think one of the things a lot of people struggle from is comparison, especially these days with social media, where people make it look like they're perfect, which is also a lot of bullshit. A lot of the ones who look so perfect on social media are usually the most messed up. And so people compare too much.
Yeah.
And then also, I like what you said, where it doesn't have to be these massive changes. If you could help people just make little mini step changes, and they could see right there that, change can happen. I think that's a huge, I interviewed this guy named Greg Sittel. He called it keystone changes, like little steps in the right direction. And I thought that was so key too. So you don't need to boil the ocean, just make one little step, one little change in the right direction.
Not one of my usual questions, but Damon, since we're talking about these lines, what has been your relationship with failure? Was there a point where, I don't like the word failure because I think it's a misperception. I think if something doesn't work out, as long as you've tried, and I'm not trying to be woo-woo, I'm not trying to be sappy or toxic positivity, nothing like that. But I think we carry over into adulthood the idea of failure from school, where if you don't get it done, you get an F, and it's like a scarlet letter. So I don't see failure as bad as it used to be. What's your relationship with failure? And when might it have changed to one of appreciation, if at all?
Yeah, I think my relationship with failure has changed a lot over the years. As I mentioned, when I was at Pepperdine, I was afraid of failure. I had paralysis. I was like, go out on the field, and for the first time, I was scared because I didn't want to mess up. And so much so that I wouldn't try or do anything. I think part of it evolves over time when you realize if you do mess up, who really cares? Nobody really cares that much about you compared to yourself. So that's one thing that's really helped. And what I've learned over time, especially, is failure is super important. You can only learn from failure and from feedback and from trying and taking those opportunities in front of you. And if you fail at those opportunities, so what? You're going to learn something, but at least you did it. And I don't think, John, a lot of times we give ourselves enough of a pat on the back for trying, because so many people pass up opportunities, whether it's going for a job, trying out for a team, asking somebody out on a date. What's the worst thing that can happen? You surprise yourself with how successful you may be in sales. If you're making cold calls and you're hearing no all the time, so what? That gets you closer to a yes. At least you're trying. Yeah. And I think so I've gotten much, much better at failure over the years and learning from it and growing, which has been a huge part. And if you can get yourself comfortable with failure or more comfortable with failure, then I think you're much better off.
David, for you, how does what you're doing now reconcile to who you were as a kid? I'm always curious about what people have picked back up again from their childhood, because life seems to be, we're kids, our dreams are kind of sapped out of our heads and programmed out of our heads. And then by the time people come back around to being fulfilled and who they're meant to be, it really does tend to be them going back and picking up who they were as a kid, their dreams, their, everything that they ever wanted, and bringing that forward, living that out. So for you, who you were as a kid, how does that reconcile to who you are now? Not meaning you knew you were going to end up here, but what from your childhood is showing up now?
Well, it's funny. When I was a really little kid, I wanted to be Batman. I literally thought I was Batman. And obviously that didn't turn out. But what you said is true, too. Sometimes you have these dreams and they get sapped out of your head. I thought that I would be a Major League Baseball player, have 4 kids, and my dad would be alive to be a great-grandfather for... And that didn't happen. My baseball career ended. I have 2 beautiful kids, great wife, my dad passed away 15 years ago at 60. And so life isn't linear. Everything that you expect is not going to happen. But things sometimes turn out for the best or turn out great anyways. Going back to, I think, as a kid, again, it comes through sports. And one of the things that I learned is I just don't give up. And I feel like I've always been a good teammate and friend. And you go through your phases where maybe you're not as humble as you should be. But at the end of the day, I feel like I'm a good person who's a pretty humble person. And I think that you start off as a kid with an open mind and learning, and that gets sapped out of you as well. But I think I've picked that back up. So I think that's what kind of resonates from being a kid to now.
So your work ethic into sports, into baseball, that commitment, did you get that from your dad? Was that innate? Was it a mix of just being in you as well as your community or your family? Was your dad an athlete when he was younger? Where did that drive in you come from? Where do you think that came from?
Probably a lot of places. I mean, for one, I haven't mentioned, but my grandfather, who fought in both theaters of World War II, I don't think anybody worked harder than that guy did, and I don't think anybody had took more moonshot goals and dreams than he did, and had one of the toughest guys ever, and what he was able to accomplish going from nothing to a big real estate empire. So you get a guy like that, but also he was one of those guys that you had to work 100 hours a week or you weren't macho enough, so you learn that that's not right. Of course, I had my dad and my mom who were great role models, but also I was really fortunate to have all these friends and their families all had strong work ethics. They were blue collar workers, from painters to whatever, but they all raised great kids. And I was really fortunate. I think that the people you grow up with make a huge impact on who you become. And we were never allowed to just kind of sit at home and do nothing. I mean, that was, you were given a ball and a bat in your bike and said, come back when the lights go out and be out there doing something. And it wasn't tolerated in my home or my friend's home. So I think that is a lot of the where I got my work ethic from. Maybe some of it's innate, but I was always really competitive and wanted to win. And so, but I was never like a perfectionist. Like, you have to get this perfect to get it done. I was always just like, let's go out there and just do the best we can and win. And if you don't win, all right, let's figure out how do you win next time.
Yeah. What do you consider your superpower?
I would say professionally, my superpower is I've been able to surround myself with unbelievable talent at Learnit. People who come in, they have the right attitude and aptitude, and they really have done tremendous things. So I think part of how I've been able to do that is create a culture that you mentioned earlier. It's hard to compete in San Francisco for talent. When you have Google, Stripe, all these massive companies with huge comp plans and company perks. I like to get them right out of school, talented right out of school, or people who've been in the workforce but they want to pivot and change careers and have little experience, and have Learnit be a learning ground for them, someplace where they could cut their teeth in sales or accounting. And that culture is one where you don't have to be perfect. John, I tell people when they come in, look, if you want to just be on railroad tracks and not make mistakes, I don't want you here. I want you to make mistakes and learn from those mistakes and make different mistakes, and then give them the autonomy to go out and try things and get them done. So I think that is my professional superpower, where giving these people the opportunity to learn and grow. And we just had our 30th anniversary party I mentioned before, and just having all these people come back, it just is so amazing. And I think from a personal level, we've already talked about it a little bit, but I just always had that mentality, whether it's work or, personal, just don't give up. I just never gave up. There's been some really tough times at Learnit through 3 economic downturns, but I always said, I'm just going to keep running into the wall until I can run through it at some point, just never give up. And, families have and you have some personal or health issues. You got to work through them, and you never give up. So those are, if I had to have superpowers, it would be creating great teams and that type of culture, and maybe being stupid enough to just never give up.
Yeah, I like what you said about mistakes. As soon as you said that, what came to mind was a previous governor that I had worked with in Connecticut, where I think when he won his election, he came by our offices to say hi. We sat in a conference room, and one of his major things was, it's okay to make mistakes. You know what I mean? Let's come up with some good ideas. We'll do our due diligence, do as much research as we can, and if it doesn't work out, or if there is a mistake of some, it's okay to make mistakes. And that was interesting because I had never heard that from somebody at his level. You know, it's usually those positions are such high level that they come in, they say hello, there's pleasantries, this and that. But to have somebody at that level, the top level in the state, in his branch, say it's okay to make mistakes, it's interesting when somebody introduces that mindset. It's interesting how you feel, how you're feeling, literally in your body shifts when somebody says it's okay to make mistakes. Like, I got you. I will support you. Let's do the best work we can. That's why we hired you guys. But it's okay to make mistakes. It's like this tension that you maybe feel in your body just kind of releases. There's a bit more psychological safety. There's a bit more freedom. So I appreciate anytime somebody, especially somebody in a leadership role, reminds people that it is okay to do that, as long as, you know, they use their best judgment, because that helps with innovation. It helps with trust, all of those things.
Yeah, absolutely. People want to work for people who feel like you have their back, and you give them the autonomy to try things and make mistakes and learn from them. Now, on the flip side, if you're a doctor or you're a pilot, you know, there's a difference there on what kind of mistakes you can make. I have a friend who worked with Tom Cruise on the Mission Impossible movie with flying, and he actually said he was great to work with. But Tom made it very clear that, you know, you're getting paid extra hours before and after I'm here, and this is very important, and this is all around safety. So you need to be as very thorough as possible and do the checks and redundant, and so to avoid any type of really bad mistakes that could hurt somebody, because there's that couldn't be tolerated. But at least he gave them the space to want to do it, and my buddy said that the team did it, and they were very thorough, and they had that extra time to do it. So yes, I'm 100% with it's fine to make mistakes. There are little specific areas when safety is involved where you have to be careful with that.
Yeah, and I mean, those instances where somebody says it's okay to make mistakes, it's not absent of accountability.
Yeah.
You know, so it's not like what you say, but how you say it. Listen, you got to be thorough. There's a lot of on the line. There's lives on the line. This is a matter of stunt coordination, this and that. But
that's exactly
you know,
right. What
we brought you in. You're the best. That's why. But so there's a nice balance. It doesn't mean the accountability has to go out the window. So that's a good reminder.
But you know, I think what you said, another thing which is very important right there, as a leader, if you give your team the opportunity to try things, and if they make mistakes, well, guess what? You need to get out in front and say, this is on me, and protect them, you know. And I'm a big believer, and I've seen this in baseball. Great coaches that I've had would put their team first. They were people leaders. When things went well, they gave them the credit.
Yeah.
And when things didn't go well, they would take the brunt of the blame. Now, I've also played for some coaches where that wasn't the case, where when things didn't go well, they pushed all the blame on the player. You know, how are we going to win the series if our number 3 hitter strikes out with 2 guys on? You know, that was something they would say to a reporter, and I was the third up hitter, and that doesn't make you feel too good. So I think that is really important as well, that you got to live by your actions and your words. If you say it's okay to make mistakes and your team makes mistakes, then you got to, obviously they should take accountability behind the scenes, but up front, you need to be out there and supporting them.
Yeah, again, I've seen that. I've seen that in sports. I'm a big fan of the Premier League. So when a game doesn't go a team's way and they have the coach at the end and they're asking them questions, it's again one conversation you have in public and another conversation you have in the back room, in the locker room. So again, it's always so reassuring when a leader goes to bat for you.
100%.
Because when they're respectful like that, when they say you can make mistakes, when they go to bat for you, there's something that turns on in you. It's like, okay, I want to go to bat for this guy or woman. I don't want to let them down. It's again that building of the trust, and it really does shift your mentality with those little behavior changes, those little communication moments that they put out there. So it's incredible what just a few words or moments can do for somebody's psychology, especially in sports.
I think what you said right there, I don't want to let them down, is one of the keys to being a great leader. If you have your team and their mentality is, I don't want to let Damon down, I don't want to let John down, it's because you've built up that psychological safety, that open space to fail, and they know they have your back, that you have their back. And I think that is so key. I think that is really, I don't want to let them down, separates somebody who's a good manager from somebody who's an exceptional leader. And getting there, and not in a manipulative way, right? Making the people feel that way where there's fear. It's organic that they come through and feel that way.
That's a good word, organic. But it is that, because I know when I've been in those moments where somebody from outside my company had come in and there was a mistake made, and the outside person thought I had made it, and in front of the head of my organization, my boss, they kind of threw me under the bus.
Yeah, how'd that make you feel? Like shit.
It made me feel like shit, but then the head of my organization was like, hold on a minute.
Yeah.
And I forget specifically what he said, but then you just realize, like, okay, he went to bat for me.
Yeah.
He doesn't know that it wasn't me that made this mistake, but he went to bat for me. He said, hold on, let's turn down the tone of the conversation. There's no finger pointing. There's no need to be disrespectful at all. I'm not going to have that in my conference room. Kind of thing. So after that, you kind of visualize them a little differently. And again, it's not manipulative, but you say to yourself, I don't want to let this person down. Like, they're gaining my trust, they've gained my respect. I'm going to support them as much as I can. So I hope people have had that experience where a leader comes through for them in those moments and they actually see it specific to them, defending them, saying you can make mistakes, saying I got your back. Because it really is inspiring. I know it sounds hokey. I'm a leadership coach and whatnot, but it's incredible. And it doesn't have to be somebody in a position of power, somebody in a formal role, but just somebody who demonstrates they're going to go to bat for you, actually show it, actually follow through. When you know somebody has your back like that, it changes everything from that point forward.
Absolutely.
All right, Damon. One last question before we jump in the book. What does leadership mean to you? I know we talked a lot about it just in the last couple of minutes and in the lead up to this question, but is there anything that I've left out or anything that we've left out in talking about leadership that you want to cover just in terms of the definition of leadership?
Well, I was just going to say, we could just rewind what you were just saying the last couple of minutes when it comes to leadership. What I'd add to that is we're all leaders. We all have the ability to be leaders. And I think leadership starts with self-leadership. You got to be able to master leading yourself before you can lead anybody else. But you don't need to run a team like I do of 100 people or even coach a little league team. I mean, you can be an individual contributor. You can be a parent. You can be a coach. I mean, we're all leaders. And to me, it's not about title. It's about taking the initiative and going out there and doing what we were just talking about. And this could dovetail into my book. Being humble, being curious, supporting people, and putting your neck out there and taking that initiative. So, I mean, that I would just add that on to everything we've said about leadership so far.
All right, at this point, let's jump into your book. Why don't you introduce the book, full title, and tell us how it came to be, if you could.
Here you go. I got a copy of it right here. If you can see it.
Awesome.
It's the Learn It All Leader: Mindset, Traits, and Tools, and it's I wrote it for a couple of reasons. One, I got to give my wife credit. She pushed me into doing it. She's been saying for years, hey, you're a great storyteller. You've got so many stories through baseball and your family and everything. I just didn't want to make the time to do it, but I finally did. She gave me that space. And so what inspired me to write the book was, first and foremost, my journey from playing for 3 Hall of Fame baseball coaches and, again, my father and what I learned from them. and that if I can do it, so can somebody else. Number two was I've been very fortunate at Learnit. We've talked a lot about already my great team, but I've been able to see behind the curtains of all these different organizations from different sizes of great leadership and terrible leadership. And so I've learned a lot from there. And the third reason really is, like I mentioned to you, I got two little kids. I got a 4-year-old and a 7-year-old. And I want them to see the legacy of what their grandfather, who they'll never meet, created, my dad, as well as my mom, and the contributions. She's here and she's doing great, but the contributions they've had, and see the impact, hopefully, that their dad's made on the world as well, and through this great team and how we've helped build and develop great leaders. So that's really, John, what inspired me to write the book.
Can you provide an overview of the book, Damon? Maybe even just some chapter titles. I don't know how you might have broken up the book, if there's different sections with several chapters, but what kind of path do you take the reader on this journey? Because it's always fascinating where there's so many books about, for instance, leadership in general, but everybody has their own stories. Everybody has their own tone, their own urgency. People always ask, why do you have so many leadership books? It's specifically for that reason. Everybody's going to come at it with different vernacular, different temperament, different identities. Every book is different just based on who it is that put that pen or laptop to that publishing. So what does that journey look like for you that you take the reader?
Yeah, and I think it's important. I've heard you mention this before in other episodes. None of this stuff is really new. A lot of it is foundational. It's just you take your own twist and approach to leadership. And so my book is easy to read, first and foremost. And I think it does a really good job of sounding like you're sitting there having a fireside conversation, fireside chat with me. It's broken into two parts, really. Being and doing. So the first half of the book is all about the mindset. And the mindset is a lot of the traits we've already talked about. Being humble instead of having an ego. Having courage to try things. Being curious, which is super important. Having ownership and integrity. Those are really what I believe to be the mindset of a learn-it-all leader. The opposite of a know-it-all, somebody who's got it all figured out and they don't need to change and they don't want to hear what you have to say. So that's the first half of the book. And the second half of the book is about doing. So it's being and doing. And doing is around habits and actions you can take that you put into place. We talk about, how to build great teams, how to coach. I got a fun story in there about, for those of you who are rock and roll fans, of a party I put together for Axl Rose and some decisions that had to be made there. And so I tie all these lessons and practical advice on how to
go on. Give me a tease on that one.
All right.
I love Guns N' Roses. So you have to give me. You don't have to give away the story. Oh yeah. I mean,
okay. I'll give away the story.
I was in high school in the 90s, so it was just this era of music where it's like everything was just fire. All genres were firing on all cylinders. Like their album.
What's your favorite Guns N' Roses song? If you could name two Guns N' Roses songs, then I'll tell you the story. But if you can't, then we'll
I mean, I think I like Civil War.
Okay.
I remember that, just like the CDs coming out, Use Your Illusions 1 and 2, and November Rain, and the video, and Patience I love. And I mean, Appetite came out in 87, I believe. 87 or 88.
Yeah, my
Is that good?
You did more
I
than
saw
good.
them in concert. It was the whole Buckethead Chinese democracy thing, so it wasn't Slash's original lineup, but no. I think I've earned it, Damon. Come on.
You have earned it. I think a couple of my favorite Guns N' Roses songs are Mr. Brownstone and I don't know, Patience. I mean, there are so many good ones. But anyways, very long story short is I'm friends with this guy named Dean Delray, who's also a great story. He's got a huge podcast now and also a big-time comedian. He called me one day and said, Guns N' Roses. Now, this was the post-Slash days before the band came back together. So it wasn't the Buckethead era, but it was Bumblefoot and these other guys that they had.
Yeah.
They said Guns N' Roses are coming to San Francisco in September to play at the Warfield, and Axl wants to have an after party. And I'm friends with his tour manager, Bill Hardy. are you interested? And I said, of course I'm interested. What kind of question is that? I mean, I got a Guns N' Roses tattoo when I was in high school. And so anyways, my wife hates when I tell that story. Anyways, so I get a call from this guy, and he says, here's the deal. Axel wants to have a party on a Wednesday night. He probably won't even show up, but it needs to start at midnight after the show and go till 5 o'clock in the morning. If you want to do it, let me know. And then I said, yes. And then he said, all right, bye. Call you later. Just that was it. So I didn't realize how hard it was to find a place. I called my best friend, my brother, how hard it was to find a place that would stay open till 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, serve booze or give away booze, and especially on a weeknight. But we found that place. The date came along, and this was right after Guns N' Roses came out of hiding. I mean, Axl disappeared for 13 years, and so it was a big deal. So we find this place. Don't even go to this show. But we put out flyers, to all our friends and girls, of course, to show up. I go to this restaurant called Original Joe's in San Francisco. I'm with the tour manager and the owner of the club called Whisper, which is no longer around. And the owner comes to me and said, hey, can I talk to you in the corner for a minute? And I'm like, sure. And this is the night of the party. This is 2 hours before the party is going to start. And he's like, I might have a little problem. I'm like, okay, what is that problem? And I was with my brother, and he said, well, we got a notice from the city that they might be doing work, construction, and it could affect the water during tonight. And I'm like, that's not a big deal. Let's just get a bunch of water bottles, and everything will be fine. And my brother said, you're an idiot. He's talking about there may be no bathrooms. And I said, oh, okay, that's going to be a bigger issue. And so he said, we have it's too late to bring in porta potties or anything. I could probably get some ice, fill up the toilets, or we can just say, screw it, let's do it, like Sir Richard Branson does. And so that's what I did. Just went for it. And so we go back to the table. We didn't mention it to the tour manager, John, who is already nervous. And so I have this term that I use in my book called purposeful awfulizing. And so that is, if you make a decision and you look at 1 year out, what's the worst case decision? What's the worst thing that could happen, and how would that make you feel? Okay, 1 year out, if the toilets don't work and the party's a complete bomb, I might feel bad for a couple days, but who cares? It's still a good story. So it's not a big deal. It's not like going this route and things don't work out, you bankrupt your company and you lose your house. So that's a different decision.
Different stakes.
That's a whole story. That's a whole lesson in the decision making. So what happened was, we show up to the party, and it's literally like a return to the 80s. A couple of the guys from Metallica were there. Scott Ian from Anthrax. Sebastian Bach from Skid Row was walking around with 2 bottles of wine. Everybody, all these guys are there. It's 400 people. It's about 75% women. And my sisters were like, what? Who are you guys? How do you put this together? This is unbelievable. But there's no Axl, right? No Axl.
Yeah.
And so people are asking me, where's Axl? And I said, look, there's Kurt Hammett from Metallica dancing on the floor with his wife. There's Sebastian Bach holding court over there. How could you possibly be complaining? And then at 3:30 in the morning, the tour manager comes running up to me and he said, Axl's here. And I'm telling you, the vibe just changed in the room. My buddy Delray was DJing was DJing. Axl comes in, and I'm not making this up. We cleared out the VIP area. Delray put on Sweet Child of Mine. Axl does his little snake dance. The whole room changed. It was incredible. He sits down and give him a cigar and whatever drink he told us to make for him. And but then he gets inundated by all these girls, and his girlfriend didn't really appreciate it, And so he was having a really good time. She stormed out, and then 5 minutes later, he stormed out too, upset. But how many people, this is chapter 5 of my book, how many people could say they had a party for Axl Rose and Guns N' Roses?
So why did they reach out to you? Was it just because of your connections, your work in that area? Like
no,
that you might have
great question. So back in look, again, everything doesn't always go as planned, but at the time we had a hotel chain in San Francisco. So we had about 6 or 7 hotels, and I became I met a couple people, and I became the guy to go to in San Francisco. I would trade free hotel rooms for backstage passes. So I got to become friends with guys like Fred Durst from Limp Bizkit.
Oh, wow.
Go out to dinner with Jacob Dylan, all kinds of rock stars. So I trade them hotel rooms. I'm still friends with a lot of these tour managers from Duran Duran and other bands. And so I've got all kinds. We could do a whole episode on some of the fun stories of meeting.
It's amazing. It's
meeting
amazing.
rock stars. So that's why they contacted me, because they figured, hey, Damon and his buddies could probably put it together, and I was the only one they knew. What turned out of that was I became really good friends with Bill Hardy, the tour manager from Guns N' Roses. Really good friends with him. His daughter Sydney is my kid's favorite babysitter after all these years, and that was back in 2007. So yeah, fun story.
So, I mean, obviously, party roaring success. Was there any comments on the water situation? Were there anything come up? Anybody?
No.
I mean,
no,
I figured
nothing
that late into the night or early morning, whichever way you look at it.
No, it was
the clientele and their drinking and everything. It's probably the least of their worries.
No, it was a pretty surreal situation. And my brother Taylor would pull me aside and he's like, "Are we okay with the water?" I'm like, "Yeah, I think we're okay with the water." And so at some point it worked out. I didn't tell Del Rey, because Del Rey is the one who put me in touch with Hardy for probably, I don't know, 6 months after that. And they're like, "Do you know what that would have done to us if that got canceled and Axl and all these people showed up? How pissed we would have been at you?" I'm like, well, again, purposeful awfulizing. It's better than canceling the party and not having that experience.
Awfulizing. I like that. I like that. So, Damon, the book, how do you structure it in terms of you spoke to the sections, you spoke to some of the chapters. Do you provide? How's your chapter structured? Are there tips at the end or suggestions, recommendations? What does that look like for somebody who wants to read the book?
I think it's written very practically, meaning in language that are easy to be consumed, and I have a lot of references in there to different books as a big book reader myself that you can check out, and there are thoughts and exercises that you can either reflect on or you can implement, and examples of, like, for instance, I'm a big fan of decision matrix and decision journaling, that I learned from Shane Paris at Fathom Street. So, it gives you ideas of where to go out and get tools and resources to be able to do things. But it's one of those books where you could read it almost like popcorn. You could just go and pick out a chapter of something that you want to get better at, whether it's decision making or coaching or playing to win with integrity, or how to go to a party where I talk a lot about how, not a lot about, but my wife will throw me into some party with a bunch of people that I don't know or really have any interest in going into it, but then just being curious and asking a couple questions, it's always an opportunity to learn and grow.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I think actually I think you'd shared something on LinkedIn about how podcasting has changed I forget the wording, but it was something to that effect, where it changed the way you viewed maybe interactions or conversations since you launched your podcast. Can you speak to that a little?
Yeah, I think, how long have you been at podcasting? Probably much longer than me.
3 years, I think.
3 years. So I've been doing it a year and a half. And everybody I come across, I say, you should be podcasting either as a guest and or as a host. Number one, because I think everybody needs a personal brand. And going back all the way to what you mentioned about that young man who said, well, I don't have anything to contribute or add. I hear that people say that all the time. That's not true. You have stories and examples. Even if you have 1 or 2 years worth of work experience, you can get on Podmatch or somewhere and you could start guesting. So I think that is so important to have a personal brand, because you could take that content like you and I spoke about and you could repurpose it for social media. You have to have a personal brand. But podcasting, I'm not perfect, but whether it comes to giving keynote speeches or even having conversations, I feel like I'm much better now after 300 podcasts. I've hosted 180 and probably been on 120, or maybe 100. But I feel like I'm a better listener, which my wife kind of laughs at, but I think it's true. I ask better questions. Questions, and you just learn so much. And the other thing, in that post you're referring to, I talk about 10 or 12 things. You learn to become more concise and share your story better. And so there's so many positives out there about getting involved in podcasting. Yeah. And I also, just like you, John, I do it. And my approach isn't to make me look great, like, oh, Damon has done this. It's all about being intentional about giving content to help other people. If you take that approach to it, whether you're posting on social media or you're guesting on a podcast, even if I can help one person, if they get one thing out of this that's going to impact them positively, it's great. And I'm sure you see this, but I get LinkedIn messages from some woman mentioned me the other day about, my framework in imposter syndrome. She said, hey, my son is 17 and he struggles with it. And I got him your book, and I sent him this episode to learn how to get better at imposter syndrome. Thanks for being vulnerable and sharing. So yeah, podcasting. And then on top of it, you get to meet so many cool people, and it's like 10x my network as far as the reach that you get and the people you speak to. So it's a really cool community.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's I've experienced most of what you've said, and it's amazing how it's had all these residual effects that I didn't anticipate.
Totally.
You think you're like, okay, I got something to say. I want to share who I am. I'm curious about my network. I want to share about books. But I never anticipated the impact that the podcast would have on me, where it's taught me more about myself. This has actually been very therapeutic because people have opened up about their obstacles, their challenges, that they're developing their professional brand, of course, but they show their human side. That didn't come from nothing. There was a long journey to get there. Some of it was good, some of it was bad. So it has been incredible. It has changed the way that I approach people in the everyday, even strangers at the supermarket. I think everybody has something to offer someone else, and it doesn't have to be, an hour-long conversation. Even in the moment, if you're with your common human beings, there's something that you can find in commonality and have a laugh about, learn about each other. So it's been a blessing in disguise, to say the least.
And if you're in sales, I've seen I'm much better on customer calls now through my listening and questioning. And I don't know, I've also really appreciated people giving me feedback along the way on how to get better, which is awesome.
Yeah.
I think receiving feedback is one of the most important skills you can get good at. And you look back at some of the podcasts I was on early on to now, it was embarrassing. But the only way, this is important for your listeners, the only way you get better at something is just get the reps in. Take action, do the work. And, if you will get better over time.
Damon, I've heard we've thrown a lot of concepts out there, a lot of words out there. You've mentioned humility. When did your idea of humility change? When did you learn your lesson in humility? What did that look like?
That's a great question. I think my lesson in humility changed the year my dad died. Our family business fell apart. And realized that everything doesn't, that was around 2009, really. Yeah. And you realize everything doesn't always go as planned. And it's only continued to grow in that direction, or 2010 or whatever the year was. And when going back to podcast and having the opportunity to meet so many great leaders, so many of the best leaders I've ever spoken to are the most humble people. You would never know that what they've accomplished, because they're not there bragging. They're not there telling you how much money they make or what they have. They're just humble. They're curious, and it's just incredible. I was just talking to this guy, Peter Bissonnette, who is a CEO of Shaw Communications for, a long time. He's the most humble guy I've ever spoken to. Always saying thank you, asking questions on how he could be a better podcast guest. And it's just incredible thinking about what these individuals have been able to accomplish. So that's really helped me as well. So for one hand, it's been by being beaten up by the world, and understanding that you can make it through it, but the best way to make it through it is by being humble and not having all the answers, just by being able to say, look, I don't have all the answers. Let me tap into somebody that I can learn from. And on the other hand, it's seeing through examples of super successful people at all walks of life and their humility. And when you do that, the individuals who are know-it-alls, who brag about themselves all the time, that really stands out too. Like, I don't want to be that person. I just don't want to be that person.
Damon, and speaking of learning about yourself, I'm curious, when I get to speak to authors on the series, I'm curious, in writing the book, how have you evolved? What's changed in you? You go into the writing process, you know what you're going to put out, or it evolves a little and you tweak in this and that. But overall, how have you changed because you've put out this book? What's changed in you?
Well, I guess I did suffer from imposter syndrome because I didn't think anybody was going to want to read it, or that, it would. But when it did come out, and I learned a lot of great lessons from that. Senior executives connected with it, a federal judge, all kinds of people that I've come across who've read my book, and they've all suffered with imposter syndrome or with what I call the trust tax, where people let you down. I mean, we all have these common situations. And so a really lesson that I learned was, hey, I do have something to say that people care about and can help impact them. Going back to the beginning of 2023, when the book came out. Because prior to that, John, if you went back and you looked at my LinkedIn feed, it was non-existent. I was an inside CEO. I was, I always spent a lot of time managing my sales team, working, in the business and everything. And then after my book came out, the biggest change for me, which I think is really important these days for everybody, is I became a more public figure when it came to Learnit. Doing keynote speeches, doing the podcasting, getting the message out to help others, instead of working through the team that way. And my team really appreciates it because it opens up the doors in different areas and unlocks opportunities through this new network, and also helps Learnit's reputation as a thought leader when it comes to leadership and development.
Yeah. Damon, when it comes to you and putting this book together, what did that process look like for you? You said it has the two major components, being and doing, correct?
Yeah. And what did it I used a book coach, which is so funny, John, because I hired her, Skylar Gray, who's awesome, and now Learnit has spun up a publishing company. And we got about 7 authors that we're working with now, who I've met either through just my network or through my friends. And so because of Skylar and her ideas, I mean, we have the Learn It All Press, which is awesome.
That's amazing.
So it was a combination of interviews and just writing alongside with her. And I have to admit, look, I've got all these ideas and all these stories, but for somebody like me, and I think that's important for your listeners out there, I need somebody like Skylar, who's probably the opposite of I am, and is able to funnel everything into a way that is easily consumable. And that's where, partnering up with somebody who's got alternative strengths than you do, I think we became a great team. And it was a great learning lesson. I mean, I would write something, she would critique it and go back and forth. And again, I was really thankful for my wife pushing me, because there was a time halfway through I didn't want to do it anymore. I just wanted to stop. And I read a couple books. I think it was the Stephen Pressfield's book, which I can't think of the name of it right now. Yes, that, and also the one called Bird by Bird. God, that's a great book, and it's just like write the first shitty draft. So those different books helped inspire me to continue on, and thinking about my little daughter that I had at the time, like, I got to get this done because I want it to be a legacy thing. And so I don't know. I'm not. And you also, there's a book out there by Daniel Pink called When, And that's which is all about getting to know when you're good at different things. So what I realized is that if I try to sit down at 3 o'clock in the afternoon and write, that wasn't going to work for me. So for me, if I was going to write and have these great ideas, or it was at like 7 or 8 o'clock in the morning and sometime on the weekends. So it was just kind of figuring out when to prioritize things and when I could be best at certain things.
That's incredible. What do you think is next for your writing? No rush. Just, is there a general direction you would want to write in or head in?
Yeah, I've got a children's version of the Learn It All Leader coming out in the next 6 months, and it's taken the concepts and themes from the book and turned it into a baseball game for little kids, and Wally and Lucy are star characters in it. So I'm doing that. Which is fun. And then I've got a collaborative project that's about 25% done with a tremendous leader who works at a Fortune 500 company. That it's all about. It's like a follow-up to Learn It All Leader. It's adaptability as a leader for senior leaders, but that's like 25% through. So that's the two projects I got going on.
Awesome. Damon, what lessons generally do you hope people take away from your book? If you could kind of encapsulate into some messaging, what is it you hope people take away?
Well, first and foremost, if I can do it, you can do it. Just got to go all in and do it. Number two is that we all deal with imposter syndrome at some point in our career in life. And if you come across somebody who doesn't, then they're either lying or they're just a sociopath. And one of my favorite sayings is that great leaders aren't born or made, they're always in the making. And so there's always more to learn, there's always more opportunities to grow, and I think that's really important.
And then you had mentioned, my next question is always, what books have inspired you? You'd mentioned a few. Are there any others that stand out as really impactful to you, your career, life, whatever it may be?
Yeah, I mean, I've mentioned a lot already, but I'm a big fan of Sir Richard Branson's books. I actually use one of his terms, screw it, let's do it. So he's got a bunch of different ones out there that are awesome. One of my favorite books is Obstacle is the Way by Ryan Holiday. Another easy book to read, but it really helps you understand how to work within your constraints, which I'm a big believer in, and stories of overcoming. I think that was actually a book that Bill Belichick was a required reading for the New England Patriots.
Oh, wow.
I'm a big fan of Team of Rivals by Doris Keene Goodman, I think her name is, which is awesome. It's about how Abraham Lincoln, he brought in a cabinet of people who were the exact opposite of him and hated him, really, because he knew he wanted to get different perspectives. So Team of Rivals is a great book. You mentioned your kids playing a bunch of different sports. David Epstein, a book called Range, is a must-read. These parents come to me sometimes and they're like, I want my kid to be a D1 baseball player like you, so I'm going to have him play baseball 24/7. I'm like, don't do that. Go pick up this book, Range, and explore different things, even outside of sports. Those are great books. And then one thing I want to say is, if you're a new leader or a leader of any level, really, you should read biographies. Read as many biographies as you can, because you could learn military lessons, leadership lessons, failures, successes. And I'll leave that with saying one of my favorites is Winston Churchill. And I've read, 10 biographies on Winston Churchill. And so there's some great series out there on him. I could go on and on about books. Last one is Decisive for Decision Making, the Heath Brothers, I think is awesome.
Okay. Yeah, is one of those guys named Chip?
Yep, one's Chip, one's Dan. I think those two wrote that one together. I like all their books, Made to Stick. I mean, they've got so many great books, but there's a laundry list of books that I like to read. I talk about a lot of them. If you're an introvert or your kids are introverts, you got to read Quiet by Susan Cain.
Susan Cain, yeah.
That really opened my eyes to
Same here.
Yeah.
Same here. That was like the first time I kind of understood my life before that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That was when it kind of, that idea of introversion and the power of introversion came to the forefront. So that was, it was an eye-opening book. I can piggyback on that recommendation. Absolutely. Damon, in wrapping up, what are you up to these days? Is there anything that you want to share? Maybe I didn't ask about, we didn't get into, anything at all? The floor is yours.
Well, I would check out my podcast, Learn It All podcast. As you can tell, I'm pretty pumped up about that. And as far as Learnit's concerned, we're doing well. We're really trying to implement AI, which we haven't spoken much about today, but I'm a huge fan of AI. I think that if you're not adopting AI and leveraging it, you're going to stack the odds against yourself. So we're coming up with some products to supplement what we're doing, not get away from live learning, but to make learning more sticky. So those are the big things going on in my life. And as you and I spoke about before, I got a 4-year-old and a 7-year-old who keep me incredibly busy, and I love them. My wife too, of course, but I love those little too, and they give me all the motivation I need to continue on the path that we're going.
Amazing. And again, Damon shared his own book, The Learn It All Leader, Mindset, Traits, and Tools. Damon, after so much time of seeing you on LinkedIn, the content you're sharing, the messaging, your interviews, the podcasts, it really is. I'm really appreciative of you coming on and sharing this time with me and answering my questions and sharing your stories on all things 80s and 90s rock. I appreciate that. Thank you for everything.
No, John, like I told you before, I really appreciate how serious and intentional you take on this. And you don't need to thank me. I've had a great time. This has been fun.
No, I appreciate that. If there's anything I might have missed, there's so much to cover, so little time. If there's anything you're curious about that I didn't ask Damon, please let me know. I'll reach out, see what kind of insights, guidance, information, and wisdom I can get back. In the meantime, thank you for watching. Thank you for listening, and I'll talk to you soon. Take care. Bye.